Hello chess friends, welcome back to our YouTube channel. In this video, we shall have a look at very instructive game played between Robert James Fischer and Bent Larsen. It was played in the Portoros 1958. So Bobby was something around 15-year-old and he was already at this point very strong. He was already a grandmaster and well, he was still inexperienced as compared to many of the top grandmasters at that point. And Bent Larsen did try to push him a little bit, and we'll see what happened of that. But let me go through, describe what happened in this game. This is a very crucial victory for Bobby, and it decided a lot of things. It majorly because it happened in the Dragon variation. Now, Dragon variation is my favorite opening, and this game has a lot to do with its history and its great fall. So, Dragon was very popular at one particular point. It was considered a very good response among all the other Sicilians. It was really reliable until one point when White started to find some really aggressive attacking options. And I would give credit to two. I mean, there are many players which use them, but as much as I have studied, I would give the credit to two players, Mikhail Tal and Robert James Fischer. Both of them from the white side totally slayed the dragon, totally destroyed the black pieces. And Bobby just gave a very simple formula: open up the H file and then sack and mate. Basically, you just have to open up the rook's file and then all you have to do is sacrifice towards the king side, and that's all. That was the kind of play that was shown by Robert James Fischer, Bobby Fischer, and he showed everyone that it's so simple to defeat the dragon. And the same happened with Tal. Tal have played so many games in the dragon and totally destroyed his opponent. And because of these two players, majorly because of these two players, there were other players as well who destroyed the dragon. This opening, its reputation really reduced and declined, and suddenly people stopped playing it. Of course, Bent Larsen was among the players, the die-hard players, who would always play the dragon despite its reputation. And well, of course, things changed in the 70s. There was a revolution in the chess theory, as there is a great book by Gary Kasparov on it. And because of this theoretical revolution, the dragon was revived, and it now it's we know that it's equal, although it's very difficult to play sometimes. But we reach equal positions, and we reach some really fighting positions, and the end games are obviously most of the time better for black. So this is a very interesting historic game because of which the reputation of the dragon severely was injured, and thanks to Fischer he did this. He was really a great player. Let us have a look at this great attacking player. So the game started with obviously E4, best by test. This is what Bobby Fischer, I think, for most of his career played, except after 1967, he switched to other openings. He studied hundreds and hundreds of books, and he started to play nearly everything, including hedgehogs and B3s and I mean Larsen openings and so many other openings. So at this point, Bobby exclusively played the E4. Sicilian played by Bent Larsen, Knight to F3, D6, and this time, as in the last game, we have seen a King's Indian from Bobby, which was his favorite system. But this time, he goes for the main line. He was never afraid of the main line. He always played opponent in the main line. He was among the most theoretically prepared players. I think Kasparov and Fischer were the two really most prepared player in the history. They knew every line out there. They knew Fischer just read every magazine out there, and I think it's Lombardi or someone has described him as a sponge. He would just sweep into the chess hall, pick up books, read through it, and remember everything he read. So this is captured. Obviously, black gets the center pawn, white gets activity. It's static advantage versus dynamic advantage. White has some activity. He's very good knight. Versus black has five pawns versus four, and this might promise him an advantage in the end game. That's very far, of course. If he survives the middle game, then he reaches the end game. But generally, it's considered that most of the time, if black reaches an end game, he is generally better. Of course, it's not a 100% truth. There are exceptions, but yeah. Knight to f6, developing piece, attacking the pawn on the e4 square. Knight to c3, g6. This move symbolizes the dragon variation. Black decides, well, it's really difficult to develop my bishop on this diagonal. I don't really want to put it on e7, and it's c5 is an attractive square, but I can't get it there in time. I'd like to put the bishop on another diagonal, and that is this a1 to h8 diagonal. It's a very aggressive diagonal, and in fact the bishop acts as both offensive and defensive piece, one of the best pieces, and it's called as a dragon bishop because there's a reason for that. It is the reason for all the tactical operations that goes on in this particular position happens because of the bishop and g7. Bishop to e3. What is the point of this move? Basically, this symbolizes the Yugoslav attack in the Sicilian. What is the Yugoslav attack? Well, we know that he's going to fianchetto, black is going to fianchetto over here and then castle. Now, one of the simplest way to attack against such kind of a triangle, pawn triangle, fianchetto system is simply to to like create a battery over here with queen d2 and exchange with bishop h6. Get rid of that and get a knight to g5 and you are winning. That's a very simple way to win. Of course, you have to do some preparatory moves like f3 and then you can go queen d2. At the same time, you get chance to play g4, h4, h5. Very interesting ideas by white. So black is not bothered. He just continues bishop g7. Now comes f3. Obviously, you can't really directly go queen d2 because knight g4 then attacks the bishop. So f3 first, protecting, like giving some extra protection to the pawn on e4, at the same time covering the g4 square. So both the bishop and the knight can't really enter the square anymore. Now comes castles. So you can see black is having a kind of a hyper modern approach. He's just concerned about his development. He's not even worried about the center or anything else. Right now, all he wants is to quickly castle. So that's what he does. He completed his development on the king side, whereas white, you can see, has some good development, but his king is still in the center and he still has to decide where to castle. Queen to d2. The queen steps up, creates a battery over here, shows her intention of playing bishop h6 at the right moment. At the same time, we are making way for the king to castle long. Now, why castling long is really the best option for white? The simple reason is you want to throw everything at black, and if your king is on g1, you can't really do that because after playing g4 and h4, your king will be terribly opened up. It's better to have a king on c1 or on b1, and then you can clearly push everything towards the black king. That's a very simple strategy. So whenever there's a opposite side castling, the game is going to be super sharp, and this is what we are going to expect here. Knight to c6. It's a very natural square for the knight. Knight just goes to the c6 square. This knight can actually take at some point. Even knight e5 is something that is very occasionally played in the dragon. And this is where basically it's a junction, and white has three different options, three major options to be particular. One is g4, one is bishop to c4, and one is castle. Now let me just show you what happens if castles is played. You can see that white has not taken control of this diagonal, so black can actually punish white by two moves. There are two particular moves. Theoretically approved move is d5. Basically this gives you some sort of an equality, and there are again like three different moves here. You can play queen e1, king b1, and you can also take, very theoretical. And there is another old line which was played during the time of Bobby. You can take the knight, and after bishop takes, you can put your bishop on the long diagonal, punishing white for not developing his bishop to the c4 square. Now this is a very well-known way of playing. So let us go back. There is another approach here that white can use. He can go g4. Now what is the point of this? Aren't we allowing the move d5? Actually, d5 is not possible to play here. If black really gets the chance to play d5, then he can really open up all of his pieces, and he will have no trouble at all to gaining easy equality. But he's not able to do this because of the simple move onto g5. Knight has to move. Wherever the knight goes, you simply pick up a pawn. I think you just take with this or this. Maybe this is better. Not really sure. Maybe pawn takes. Knight takes. Knight takes, I think, is far better. So something like this basically will give us a free pawn and a lot of advantage, of course. So going back, the entire point of playing g4 is to stop black from playing pawn to d5. And the same happens when you play bishop to c4. The bishop is very active on the diagonal. It pins the pawn on f7. At the same time, it stops black from playing d5. This is kind of a prophylactic move. It does both attack and defense. So in this game, we see white playing bishop to c4. This is one of the main line. I think it's called as a Saltus variation. So the point of putting the bishop here, as we have discussed, is to stop black from playing d5. Pin the pawn on f7, and this has a very important point. Now that the f7 pawn is pinned, you can play h4, h5 and capture on g6, and once you capture on g6 you'll be able to open the h file because he can't take with the f pawn, right? His f pawn is pinned. He will have to capture with his h pawn, in which case the entire rook's file will be opened up, and it's very simple. You just have to exchange the bishops on h6. Super simple idea of attacking here. So bishop c4 is actually a very dangerous move, and this is where Bent Larsen, I think, I can't say went wrong, but I think chose a very secondary move or inferior move. Nowadays we know that whenever he puts his bishop on c4, it's a serious move. We have to act very quickly, and black must play bishop to d7 here. What's the point of this? Well, the point is, now obviously you can't put the bishop on e6. You can't compete against him because there are two pieces looking at it, so you can't really go over there, but you can put it on d7. The point is, let's say you castle. Now rook can quickly go on the c file, and we are getting a very quick counter attack, and black is not behind in attacking. Black also has his own trump cards. So this is the generally approved way nowadays of playing bishop to d7 and quickly getting the rook on the c file. At the same time, we know that there are sacrificial ideas on the c file. But in this game, Bent Larsen went for a secondary option. Knight takes on d4. This is actually not really good, for a few reasons. Because after bishop takes, he can't really get. I mean, he didn't really get anything out of this trade because it has really benefited white. If anyone, you can see the bishop has improved in its position, and black has not really got either the e6 square or any kind of particular advantage after this trade. So this is not really considered to be the best. And something like e5 is not really good because that blocks the bishop, and you don't really want to block that dragon bishop. Bishop to e6 is played. Again, not really a great move, but fine. It is a playable option. If captures, then actually white should not capture, because if takes, then the pawn comes to the e6 square. This is considered to be good for black because you get first some squares for your king to run away if there is an attack. You get open file for the rook. At the same time, white is not able to play knight to d5, which is actually one of the main attacking ideas in this kind of positions. So in this kind of positions, you have to be careful not to give black the center, and Bobby plays very cleverly. He just puts his bishop back and he asks black, what are you going to play here? Black just gets his queen on the queen side, queen to a5, pinning this. White castles, pawn to b5, king to b1. Now king to b1 comes with a very clever threat. The threat is, for example, let me just show you if you are careless, something like a6. In this case, white can actually go knight to d5, and when you capture, I can play an intermediate move. Knight takes on e7, check, king has to move, and only then I capture. This is actually a very bad position. Knight can always come back, and this pawn on d6 is very weak. This is nearly winning for white. So let's go back. There is this trick, so that's why black has to be a little careful. Either he has to move his f rook away, so the king gets the access to the f8 square, or he has to play a move like pawn to b4, closing the diagonal, so knight d5 is no longer a big threat. In fact, Bent Larsen played knight to d5 here. Bobby played knight to d5. Bobby was white, pardon me for that. And black actually took over here. Bishop takes, and now this is the point where everything was decided. Bent Larsen can easily capture this guy, and after something like this, and anything like this, basically the position will be equal. But Bent Larsen decided not to take the bishop and not to go for equality. That will actually trade a lot of pieces. You can also just take over here. That will exchange a lot of pieces. He decided, well, let me keep pieces on the board, and he went for rook 8 to c8. Now this is a real mistake. I would really call it a mistake because this does clear up some really important things. White gets the chance to save his very important bishop. This bishop is not only aggressive, he's doing a very good job of pinning the pawn on f7, and as we know, h4 h5, and when we take, the h file will be totally opened up. He does not have the option to capture with the f pawn. He's doing a very great attacking job. At the same time, the bishop perfectly holds the white queen side. It's like there's no way that black can make inroads if the bishop is holding everything so tightly. That bishop is really important. In fact, basically, if you just look at this position, I've been a dragon player for about 7 years or more, I can tell you that this position is very unpleasant for black to play because there is no way that black can get some serious counterplay. And the pawn avalanche a5 a4 is super slow. Here comes rook to c7, just trying to double the rooks, probably at the same time protecting over here and protecting the weak pawn over here. Not really a great move. Now white starts his attack, pawn to h4. Now Bobby is very good in this kind of positions, and basically this is where we will discuss the strategy. And this is a very important thing. How do we understand this kind of positions? Let's go into the strategy. So here we have it. Let's discuss the strategy using the very simple basic model of the pawn structure. This is the pawn structure that arises out of the dragon, the Yugoslav attack. So let's discuss a little about this. What is actually happening in this position? You can see white's d pawn is missing. Can he make use of it? It rarely occurs that he can make use of it. He can't really put the rook on d1 and really make use of it. Most of the time it doesn't work. But you can see black has an open c file and he can definitely make use of it. He generally puts his rook on c8, sometimes a rook, sometimes f rook. I would prefer the f rook most of the time, and the a rook can go to the b8 square. So generally his plan is very simple: get the rook to the c8 square and try to sacrifice over here. At the same time, this works very well with the it's very complementary to the bishop on g7. There's a lot of fire on this point, and the queen can also be on a5. So everything is it's like a laser like attack on the dark squares, and if there is no knight on f3, the attack is directed to the b2 square, so it just gets deadlier and deadlier. So this is what black strategy is. At the same time, you can see there are 5 connected pawns that black has versus 4 over here. So black has a kingside majority, and in any kind of endgame this will be an advantage for him, a slight advantage of course. And the king can also very quickly come into the game via the dark squares. This king, as we know, can sometimes be tugged on b1 and c1, which if he's on b1 he's really far away from the game. So um, what are his ideas? What are black's ideas? Black's ideas are very simple. He wants to play rook to c8. He's going to play with his pieces queen to a5. Knight on c6 will jump to e5 square, and there can be an attack with the pawns with b5, b4, a5, a4 at the same time. So this is the kind of plan that black is going to use and put a lot of pressure on the c3, d4 and b2 square using the bishop, rook and the queen. What is white's strategy? If you observe the position, white's king will be on b1 or c1, and if you look at this position, it clearly shows what white's intentions are. He wants to play g4, h4, h5. Sometimes you don't even need to play g4. You can directly prefer to play h4, which is most of the time better, and just sacrifice the pawn on h5 just in order to open the rook on the h5. That's the point. You play h4, g4, h5. Pry open the h file. There's a bishop on e3. You exchange the bishop pair, and once that is done, it's very simple to attack the black king. So these are the kind of strategies that both the players are following over here. So let's now go back to the position and let us see the rest of the game and how it worked out. So coming back to this position, we can see white's strategy is actually really working out, whereas black's strategy is not really going to be that great because there is hardly any pressure on the white position. There are some attacking pieces, but they're not attacking anything in particular. So there are some terrible mistakes. These bishops are really holding everything tightly, and actually white's king is very safe on the b1 square, whereas black's king is not really safe. So white is going to start his pawn attack. There we go. Queen to b5. The idea is very simple. You want to play a5, a4, attack the bishop. The bishop is nearly trapped. Now comes h5. This is a very popular pawn sacrifice. If you take with a knight, I would just take the bishop. And if king takes or knight takes, g4 is coming, queen h6 is coming. This is a very deadly attack. So rook fc8 was played. Now we capture on g6. H takes. Obviously, this was the entire point of having the bishop on b3. He cannot capture with the f pawn, so he is forced to capture with the h pawn, in which case the rook's file is opened up. Now it's very simple. All you need to do is get your queen on the h file and it's all over. So here comes g4, very typical attacking idea. You want to play g5, and once the knight moves, the h7 square is weak. At the same time, this opens the queen's access to the h file, and queen can go to the h7 square or the h8 square depending on the situation. Here comes a5, g5, and now the knight has to move. If you don't really move the knight, there will be a lot of trouble. Knight to h5 is played. What happens if he just keeps on attacking us? Then we take, He takes, we take, he takes, that's a check. We can give up our queen. If he does capture that, there's a lot of trouble. Rook h8 is checkmate. What happens if we play something like f6? Well, queen to h2, swinging the queen to the side. Queen h7 check is coming and the king moves and we just promote with a discovered check. It's too bad for back. This is totally lost, obviously. So let's go back. After the move g5, the knight is forced to move. Knight goes to h5. So the h file has been opened up. Now let's use Bobby's formula. Bobby's formula is very simple. Number 1, open the h file. Number 2, sack. Number 3, sack. Number 4, checkmate. It's time for sacrificing and you just clear up everything that gets in your way and go directly for the king. Now comes g6. This pawn is pinned and we are really using it for our advantage. Here comes e5. This is a really unpleasant move to make, but you have to make it. And the point is, you are really closing in the attack, but the problem is this bishop on g7 is no longer a great attack you piece. It's actually just a normal bishop anymore. It's no longer, it doesn't have the fire of the dragon anymore. Here comes pawn takes, king goes over here, and the bishop just tucks back. The strategy is very simple. This pawn is attacked because of the pawn moving to e5. The pawn on d6 is now a target. At the same time, bishop h6 is a very simple move that's going to happen. If d5 is played, the point is you're temporarily blunting the bishop, so the f7 pawn can be captured, but that's fine. White just grabs it. This is captured, and now we play a very nice move, pawn to d6. This bishop's open up. This bishop is open. This is really very good for white. Now comes rook f6. Bishop g5. The rook cannot move. For example, if the rook goes over here, this is really unpleasant. Bishop e7 is coming, and by the way, you can also take it directly, but I prefer bishop e7. Much better, much stronger. The king is in very bad position. So let's go back. In this position, you can't really move the rook. The queen goes back. Now we take, and now there are multiple wins over here. I can show you a very pretty line. Queen h6, and if the queen goes over here, there is a beautiful move. Rook to g1. What a pleasant move. The queen is pinned over here, so it can't really capture the rook. If you take, there comes rook to g8. Beautiful mate. Wonderful. Okay, let's go back. In this position, Bobby decides to play the very simple move, pawn to d7, attacking the rook, making it mandatory for the rook to move. And when the rook moves, there are two checkmates. This is really good, but this is even better. Just check over here. This is gone. If you go to this file, just a check, and that would win the game. Just king h7 and just take your bishop, threatening mate everywhere over the board. Can't really play that. And if you play bishop to e7, there comes queen to h6, another pretty checkmate. Queen takes control of the light square, the dark squares. Bishop takes control of the light squares. The pawn covers the rest of the square. Beautiful attacking game by Robert James Fischer. This is how he played games from the white side, and this is exactly how Mikhail Tal used to play the white side. And everyone thought that dragon is such a horrible opening to play, and everyone just stopped playing this opening for a long time. Its reputation was really shattered by both Bobby and Tal. Actually, it's also the fault of the black players. They did not really have the grit to find out refutations. Later on, when it was 1970, during the 1970s, there was a revolution in the opening theory and the dragon was revived. Many great exponents appeared and the dragon came back into regular use. Another great exponent of the dragon was Victor Korchnoi. But I think one of my favorite exponents is Hikaru Nakamura. At the same time, Christopher Ward. He has wrote some beautiful books on the dragons, so definitely worth checking out. But this is the way Bobby used to slay the dragon. So hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching and do subscribe to my YouTube channel. We are going to come back with the third game of the My 60 Memorable. So until next time.